So if you see green light, that means go, I guess. Obviously I'm not Larry. Larry is out in the foyer. I am doing the May edition of this class. I will say I am not nearly as knowledgeable as Larry. He's been studying this for a lifetime, and his lifetime's almost double mine. So he's out there, right? He can't hear me, right? Yeah. But he takes a special interest in this, and he does a very, very good job of elaborating and kind of digging into some of the different individuals and the things that they did, and kind of the interweaving of these stories. I don't know that I can match that, and frankly, this lesson series doesn't exactly lend itself to that. It's more of a question and answer type of series that we're doing. But before we really get started, I wanted to see if there's any announcements. I know Austin Creel, Tabitha's husband, Patricia's son-in-law, was baptized on Thursday, I believe it was. He had studied with Terry a little bit and wanted to obey the gospel. So that was something. He said some very good words about the congregation here and the things that he appreciates about us, and the fact that it really helped him come to the conclusion that he was missing something and he wanted to be baptized. So I'm sure they'll be here shortly. They've got a little one, so we know how that can be sometimes. I know there are some surgeries and things going on. Anything that wasn't mentioned in the bulletin or in the emails, Jeremy, you know of anything offhand?
No, I just seen that Lisa posted that her airway procedure went really well. They opened her up further than she had been.
Oh, really? Okay. Good. If you didn't hear that, he said Lisa's surgery went well. It seems like it was very successful. Opened her up more than what she's ever been opened up before. She's got a lot of scar tissue and blockage and stuff that prevents some or gives her some breathing difficulties and other things. Brother David Day, would you mind leading us in prayer to start us off?
Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for this Lord's Day you've given us. You blessed us with, Father, on this earth, beautiful weather we had to enjoy to come out and be here today. Father, we're so thankful for your word that you've given to us, and we know that it's true, Father. As we study the divided kingdom and look how they acted, how they responded to you, Father. Take their example, use it in our own life, Father, that we won't make those same mistakes, Father, that we will be true to you to the end of our lives. In Christ's name, amen.
Thank you. I did fail to mention we've got a couple of visitors that are passing through. I think they did some of the raising of Alyssa as she was growing up, so they're friends with Alyssa and Jeremy. So it's good to have them as they travel through and visit with us. So today we're talking about Lesson 18. If you are not sure where we're in Lesson 18. I believe there are some printouts on the wall out there if you did not get a copy of that. If you don't have a copy, if there's not one, just let us know and we'll make sure that you get one. Today we're going to talk about Lesson 18, Amaziah, Jehoash, Jeroboam II, and Uzzah. So I am not always the best at old Bible names, but we will try to get through it. So I wanted to start off, obviously, with number one. We're going to talk about in Judah, Amaziah. My wife's laughing at me right now. So, Amaziah, Larry, help me out. To whom is Amaziah compared? So let's go ahead and turn to 2 Kings 14. We're going to start there, 2 Kings 14. If somebody would read 1 through 4, and then if someone would read 2 Chronicles 25, 1 and 2. So that's 1 Kings 14, 1 through 4, and 2 Chronicles 25, 1 through 2.
In the second year of Joash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel, Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, became king. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jehoiada of Jerusalem. He did right in the sight of the Lord, yet not like David his father. He did according to all that Joash his father had done. Only the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burnt incense on the high places.
All right, and then 2 Chronicles 25, 1 and 2.
Amaziah was 25 years old when he began to reign. And he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Jehoiada of Jerusalem. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, but not with a perfect heart.
Okay, so starting right out of the gate, we're seeing some of the lineage. That'll come later. It'll become more important in one of the later questions when we talk about the fathers of these individuals. So keep that in the back of your mind as you look at that. But the first question here was, to whom is Amaziah compared? Both David and Joash, and we see that in both of the references here. He was 25 years old when he became king, reigned 29 years, but then he is compared to both his, yet not like his father David, who of course we know is not his immediate father, but the way the writer here uses that term, referencing back to his great-great-grandfather or whatever great he is in that lineage. And then, of course, it talks about he did everything that his father Joash had done. So he's comparing them to two different people here. What kind of heart did he have, though? What did he do in the sight of the Lord? I'm sorry? Imperfect, yes, but he had the heart of one that was right in the sight of the Lord. So, kind of going down the path that George is talking about here, let's flip one chapter over from Chronicles 25 back to Chronicles 24. I'm sorry. Let's look first at Chronicles 17. I want to go there first. Chronicles 17 verses 1 and 2. If somebody would read that for me.
And Jehoshaphat his son reigned in his stead and strengthened himself against Israel. And he placed forces in all the fenced cities of Judah and set there.
I'm sorry, Jeremy. Did I say 2 Chronicles? I meant 1 Chronicles. That's my fault. 1 Chronicles 17, 1 and 2. All right, so what is it saying about David's heart in this setting? Nathan has given him permission to do something, but why? He's saying that do all is in your heart, for God is with you. If God was with him, that implies that David's heart was good. And in this case, it's talking about building the temple, and David had already said, here I am in a nice place, but the covenant of the Lord is under a tent curtain. So he thought that was inappropriate. His heart was in the right place. So we are seeing that Amaziah is being compared to David in this sense, and the heart that David had. Let's also look at 1 Kings 15, verses 3 and 5. 1 Kings 15, verses 3 and 5.
And he walked in all the sins of his father, which he had done before him. And his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father. Verse 5. Because David did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, and turned not aside from anything that he commanded him all the days of his life, save only in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. All right.
So I chose these two verses because it explicitly talks about David's heart and talks about how David's heart was good and was right in the sight of God. So when we're talking about Amaziah being compared to David, we see that example and how David, and I use 1 Kings 15 and 3 where it's talking about the individual here not being loyal to the Lord his God, with the understanding that David was loyal in his heart to God. And that'll come into play here in just a second when we talk about this as well. So Now let's look at Joash. That's in 1 Chronicles 24. Let's look at 1 Chronicles 24. First Chronicles 24, verses 2 and 4. It says, "And Nadab and Abihu died before their father and had no children." I'm sorry, I think I wrote down the wrong one again. Second Chronicles, whoever said that over there. Second Chronicles 24. Apparently I got blind yesterday when I was writing. So 2 Chronicles 24, verses 2 and 4 says, "Joash did what was right in the sight of the Lord all the days of Jehoiada the priest. Now it happened after this that Joash set in his heart on repairing the house of the Lord." So Joash had set in his heart that he was going to repair the house of the Lord. But there was a stipulation here on how he was going to do right. What was that stipulation that was mentioned here? As long as the priest was alive and was guiding him, he would do right in the sight of God. Now, I'm sure he was not thinking along that line of, as long as this guy's around, I'm going to do right. It was just that presence of that individual that was a good influence on him and was really raising him up to do the right things. So how does that apply to Amaziah as far as his? Well, let's look at... Well, we already see it. Let's look back at 25 and verse 2. 2 Chronicles 25 and verse 2, it says, "And he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, but not with a loyal heart." And we saw that a minute ago when we were referencing David's heart and the individual that was being compared to David. That individual did not have a loyal heart. So what does that mean to not have a loyal heart? And I think someone else has said perfect. Is that what yours said? A perfect heart.
I think of these people that are on again, off again. Sometimes it seems like they're doing right, and then so often it seems like they've strayed. Maybe they come back and then they go back away. But I get that kind of idea from this. Is that some of the stuff he did was right, but a lot of it wasn't. A lot of it was selfish, self-serving.
Yeah. He was, of course, growing up in this situation. In Amaziah's case, he is grown up. He's doing this because it's expedient for him. It's not necessarily because he has a love for God. It's because he feels that he's going to gain something from it. This alliance with God. So it's more of an agreement that he will follow God as long as things are going well. So, not with a loyal heart. And we see that, I think Jeremy mentioned, we see that sometimes in today's approach to Christianity and to God and our relationship with Him, where we don't always have a loyal heart. As long as things are going well, we're okay with that. But the minute things go sour, sometimes we blame God for that and turn away from Him. At least he was doing what was right in the sight of the Lord, I guess could be said for him, but it wasn't with that loyal heart, a true relationship. We see that in a little while as well with one of the later kings here as we go through this discussion, where they did not have a loyal heart either. That they did these steps, they checked the boxes, but they were not doing it for the right reasons per se. So the final question on number 1, what was not removed? I'm sorry? The high places. And what was going on in the high places? They were still worshiping. They were still sacrificing in these high places. So here he is. He's saying that he follows God, and he's wanting to do these things, but yet he's not fully committing to that action. And by not fully committing to that action, he's bidding Godspeed, as it were, to these individuals, and almost maybe not implicitly saying that they are okay with what they're doing, but he's certainly not going against it. He's not taking away those opportunities for these people to worship a false god. So he did not tear down these high places. And of course, we've seen that as a theme throughout many of these kings, and it will continue to be a theme where these high places have not been torn down, and if they have, they keep getting rebuilt.
You see that as a thing in modern politics too. Even though you may not agree with some stuff, and we've all known people who are good people, but they'll let bad things go along because that's what people wanted. No different than Pilate when he washed his hands.
Yeah.
He didn't agree with it, but he's going to go up against people.
Yeah, you can think of all kinds of different verses, returning to its own vomit, a lukewarm person, one that's kind of towing the line or trying to toe the line. There's all these different examples of that very thing, even in today's secular and spiritual sides. So, all right, looking at number 2, what did Amaziah do as soon as he confirmed the kingdom? And what law of Moses did he observe? Let's look at, let's go back to Deuteronomy first. Deuteronomy 24 and 16, and we'll see the law there. Deuteronomy 24 and 16. All right. So what do we sometimes refer to this set of scripture as, or how do people sometimes refer to it, paraphrasing it? The sins of the father would not be visited upon the sins or the inherited sin, right? So this is a law here that's talking about those children would not be put to death for their fathers, that a person will be put to death for their sin only, right? So keep that in mind as we progress back up to 2 Kings 14 and verse 5 and 6. 2 Kings 14, 5 and 6. All right, and then Chronicles 25, 3 and 4 says, Now it happened, as soon as the kingdom was established for him, that he executed his servants who had murdered his father the king. However, he did not execute their children, nor did he did as it is written, but did as it is written in the law of the book of Moses, where the Lord commanded, saying, The fathers shall not be put to death for their children, nor shall the children be put to death for their fathers, but a person shall die for his own sin. Now, many times God has told the different kings and different, and in fact Israel and others, that they should wipe out complete groups of people, complete lineages. Why is it that in this case that is not what is happening with Amaziah?
Well, these are just servants. This is not a lineage as far as those who have been in the king role or in the position of power. They were doing this at the command of other people. There was, I guess, a coup d'etat rebellion of sorts. So they were just the closest ones to his father when this occurred.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think the Lord has commanded any of this to occur.
Exactly.
This is just not revenge, but it's justice under the law of Moses.
Yeah. I would be very hesitant to call it revenge. Yes, I think this is absolutely justice. But Jeremy said something in that set of words, God commanded. God did not command for Amaziah to kill these individuals and their lineage as well, their progeny. They were not to be killed. It wasn't commanded by God. However, there was a law that was already established that handled this, so God had already spoken in that sense. He had already said, that these individuals were, I mean, they committed murder, they were worthy of death. That was established in Mosaical law. So that's what Amaziah is doing, is following Mosaical law here. He's doing the appropriate thing. Had he been commanded by God to go further, then he would have been appropriate to do that, but God had not told him to go beyond what he had already, the law that had already been given. So, all right, so he's starting off on the right foot, I think, as far as that goes, because he's giving credence to the Mosaical law. He's doing the things that fall under that, and he's not going beyond it. He's not taking matters into his own hands. He's following God's previous commands for that. So the answer, I guess, when we talk about what did he do as far as as soon as he had been confirmed in the kingdom, he executed his servants who murdered his father. But he did not kill the children of the murderers, which is part of the second question there. So when Amaziah prepared for battle, he hired men of valor from Israel to go with him. What did the man of God tell him in 2 Chronicles 25, 5 through 8? Right. God was not specifically with who? Israel. So here is the king of Judah. He has gotten an army together, right? But then he thought that's not enough, so he got some hired men, some men of valor from Israel. But what was told to him was, do not take the army of Israel to go to war, because the Lord was not with Israel. So when we think about that, when we think about this army that God is with, and then they're tainting it with this other group of individuals that God is not with, what does that do to the whole?
They were going to be defeated. He said, if you take these men, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
You better be real strong when you go, because you're going to lose. Because God can not only help you, he can take you down.
He can certainly take, yeah. Bobby, I think you were saying something. It taints the whole. And so we see that, of course, in New Testament when we're talking about the leaven and the leavens the whole loaf and those things. We see that example, and this is just an early example of that, where this small group of individuals, comparatively small group of individuals to the whole army, is now going to taint the whole army. And by doing that, it would cause God to have to act on that. He had already said to the people of Israel that they were not with him, and he was exacting punishment on them if he was not. Amaziah would put him in an awkward position of having to keep two promises. So how is he going to approach that? Well, he tells the prophet to tell the king not to do this, not to go do this thing, because God would not be with him. He was giving that warning there, saying that he would not be with him. And of course, as Jeremy mentioned, God has the power to take away the victory as well as give the victory.
It's interesting to see here that he only found 300,000 fighting men in all of Judah.
And what age?
And what age were they? They were 20 years old and above.
Yeah.
But he was able to find 100,000 retired from just Ephraim in Israel. And that proportionality plays into what happens soon after this. That Israel was very easily able to come in and just take Judah and do whatever they wanted to with them.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, too, that specifically it says here, that the prophet says that God specifically is against the people of Ephraim, not with them. And my thought is that they are very close geographically. They're just north of the border.
Right.
It would be extremely easy for the people of Ephraim to make their way to Jerusalem to worship God in the way they should, and they're not. And so those people in specific are without God.
And you see that they, because of that closeness geographically, what they do later. But Jeremy brings up a good point that he's not able to find a huge fighting force, and he really, took all these 20 and above that were capable of fighting. And, he could probably have gotten even more if he'd gone maybe to 18 or 16-year-old. But the point is that he was having to supplement by using those men of Ephraim. All right. Let's look at number 4. It says, when Amaziah dismissed the men of Israel. What was their attitude as they returned home? That's found in verses 9 and 10. You can just you can imagine what their attitude is, though.
Anger was greatly kindled.
Greatly kindled or aroused, as my New King James Version says. They were aroused in anger against that happening. So they returned home in great anger, it says. So looking at number 5, describe Amaziah's victory over Edom. Somebody read 2 Kings 14 and verse 7, and someone read 2 Chronicles 25, 11 and 12. So 1 Kings 14, verse 7. All right. So here we see 10,000 Edomites, but let's look at a little bit more of an expounded version of that in 2 Chronicles 25, 11 and 12.
Amaziah strengthened himself, led his people forth, and went to the valley of Salt, and struck down 10,000 of the sons of Edom. The sons of Judah also captured 10,000 alive, and brought them to the top of the cliff, and threw them down from the top of the cliff, so that they were all dashed to pieces.
Okay, so he killed 10,000 immediately, but then he took 10,000 captive and took them up on the top of a big rock and threw them off. Do you think he was trying to send a message here? I think there was probably a little bit of a message. And he's trying to show his power. He's trying to, I get the impression that he's trying to pontificate a little bit and kind of chest beat and say, look at what I am. After he was, unable to proceed with those people of Israel, he took this as an opportunity to show off a little bit, I think. At least that's the impression I get from it. All right, number 6, what did the men of Israel do on their way home? We alluded to that a second ago. Look at verse 13 of chapter 25 there. It says in the last half of that, they raided the cities of Judah from Samaria to the Beth Horon, killed 3,000 in them, and took much spoil. So they really, they were mad. Their anger was kindled or greatly aroused. So here they are. They're taking it out on these cities as they went home. So now they're approaching, or they're just as they go, they're just pillaging. They're destroying. They're taking their vengeance out on the king's land and their people and the cities thereof, and killed 3,000 people because of that decision.
We can infer something from that, David.
Yes, sir.
But these mercenaries, that's basically what they were, paid 100 talents of silver. And obviously that was probably less than they were normally accounted for, but they had, the deal was, here's your 100 talents, but whatever you can plunder is yours.
Yeah.
And then their whole thing got canceled. They got mad about it, so they went and got their own plunder.
So David was saying that the original contract was for 100 silver, right? And so the unwritten part of that contract would be whatever you can plunder along the way is yours as well. Now, on first glance, when this contract is broken, they still got their original payment of 100 silver. So shouldn't they be happy with that? You would think, well, we didn't even have to fight for this. We didn't have to do our job. We just got 100 free, shekels of silver. No, there was that underlying thing in the contract that was given that now they don't have access to. So they're going to exact that toll, as it were, on those cities along the way and take what they feel was rightfully theirs, because the king had broken that agreement with them.
Well, but also you have to figure here, right, feeding and moving 100,000 men frees them.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
Moving them from place to place, keeping them fighting ready and all this stuff probably consume a large portion of that 100 pounds coming in and going back. So essentially, it's probably going back as little as nothing. So yeah, the spoils of war for what they were promised was what they were going to pay their men with to keep
a starting fee or a earnest money. Yeah. One thing that as I read this, the immediate question I have to myself is, did God know this was going to happen? And of course the answer is yes. God knew what was going to happen by him telling Amaziah to deny this army and to turn it away. God knew this was going to happen, but why do you think he allowed it to happen?
Well, this is the consequence of Amaziah not asking God first.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see here that Amaziah sought God's counsel before he hired these mercenaries. We see that he hired the mercenaries, and then God's prophet runs and warns him, hey, wait a minute, what you've done is not going to work out. Amaziah should have known that Judah was not, or that Israel, and God was not with Israel, and should have been really leery of getting them involved with something that he wanted God's help with. It sounds like he may not have needed a whole lot of help because there's only 20,000 guys down there that they have to kill. Regardless, this is a consequence of Amaziah making decisions without God, making plans without God.
Yeah.
You can ask for a refund. He asked for a refund. One of the brothers, we already paid it. He goes, "Well, good.
Yeah.
I'll give you much more."
Yep. So there are consequences to actions, and we've seen that with each of the kings that have turned from God. This is not the first time there has been a consequence that consequence has been played out on the peoples of the king instead of the king definitively. So here's a consequence to Amaziah's disregard for the tools, the people that he had at hand. He had a prophet there readily available to ask and seek guidance from God. He had God to seek whether or not, and obviously God would have told him this, because as soon as he had committed this course of action, God sent his prophet to warn him and say, do not do this. But since he did, there is a consequence to that, and that is the consequence that's being played out here. So that speaks to us today, even today, when we study these things, we know that there are all types of people, there are all types of attitudes towards God, and we need to make sure that we're using the bad examples and stay away from those, and those good examples and use those, and stay with a heart that is right towards God. And of course, we see in this case that Amaziah, this was the consequence for him not having a loyal heart to God, as we mentioned earlier. All right. How did the victory work to his detriment? Well, in verses 14 and 16 of that, we see that he took to worship the gods of Edom, and God even, our God, even references these gods and say these gods couldn't even save those Edomites. Why are you turning to them? Why are you going to these gods and using them and incorporating them in your people's worship? So how did it work to his detriment? Obviously, it was... I'm trying to find my verse here. Angered the Lord, right?
This was the point that he went from sort of being for God to not being for God at all.
Yeah. This was definitely a turning point for him. He is now full on committed to those things that are not of God. He has turned a page here, as it were. So
Not even a smart move. If you're going to pick the idol to worship, why pick the guys who just defeated their country?
right.
God did nothing for them.
And God even points that out to him, right? You know, what are you thinking? So there's that incredulous piece of that. You know, why did you take these gods that were not even powerful enough to stop the army that you had? So he doesn't seem like a wise man by any means. Okay, let's go into the second part of this. We are slow going through this. I didn't realize that I was going to take this much time. I'm sorry. What challenge did Amaziah send to Jehoash? And what was Jehoash's reply to him? Let's read 2 Kings 14, 8 through 10. I think it's important to read that because it gives you a better idea of what actually happened here. So, 2 Kings 14, 8 through 10.
Then Amaziah sent messengers to Joash, the son of Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, Come, let us look one another in the face. And Joash, the king of Israel, sent to Amaziah, king of Judah, saying, The thistle that was in Lebanon sent to the cedar that was in Lebanon, saying, Give thy daughter to my son to wife. And there passed by a wild beast that was in Lebanon, and trode down the thistle. Thou hast indeed smitten Edom, and thine heart hath lifted thee up. Glory of this, and tarry at home. For why shouldest thou meddle to thy hurt, that thou shouldest fall, even thou and Judah with thee?
All right. So 2 Chronicles says essentially the same thing, almost verbatim. So a couple of things here first. What was Lebanon known for as far as, why is cedar mentioned here? I'm sorry? Lebanon is known for its cedar. We see that in other instances of the Bible where it's talking about building things up and using those things. I believe it's used when we're talking about Leviathan and that story as well. So Lebanon is known for the strength of its cedars, the size, the usage that it is given apparently to several countries here. They know what that means. And here he's given this this warning. He's almost like he's flicking a fly off his shoulder, talking to, sorry, I'm flicking a fly off my speaker or microphone here. He's saying, go away. Just because you had this little victory here, don't get too big for your britches here. Don't think too highly of yourself. You should probably stay home and think about what you're asking. So Amaziah is asking Jehoash to meet him in battle, to duke it out, as it were, and Joash mocked him and implied that he was too big for his britches. Now, I do think it's kind of interesting, not funny, interesting that he finishes that phrase. What was the last part of that there, Jeremy? And? Yeah. He's warning him. He's saying, look, it's not just going to be bad for you. It's going to be bad for all of Judah. Again, going back to those consequences of action. Here he has gotten a little full of himself. He's thinking too highly of himself, and he's going to push his boundaries a little bit too far. And Jehoash knows that it's not going to work out for him. So he says, go home. Think about it. Think about what you're saying here. All right, so describe the confrontation between Amaziah and Jehoash and what happened to Amaziah. Go ahead and read 11 through 14 again, Jeremy, if you don't mind, just continuing that.
But Amaziah would not hear. Therefore Jehoash, king of Israel, went up, and he and Amaziah, king of Judah, looked one another in the face at Bethshemesh, which belonged to Judah. And Judah was put to the work before Israel, and they fled every man to their tents. And Jehoash, king of Israel, took Amaziah, king of Judah, the son of Joash, the son of Amaziah, and Bethshemesh, and came to Jerusalem, and brake down the wall of Jerusalem from the gate of Ephraim unto the corner gate, 400 cubits. And he took all the gold and silver and all the vessels that were found in the house of the Lord, and in the treasures of the king's house, and hostages, and returned to Samaria.
All right. So here we see he didn't take the advice that was given to him. And Jehoash, I think, was trying to prove a point here. He could have stopped maybe a little bit before destroying him completely. But he went ahead and went into Jerusalem and sacked it as well, right? He opened a big gash in the walls and really sacked the city. Do you think there's anything else maybe behind that as well?
Well, he, along with all of his forefathers, I guess, all these bad kings in the northern kingdom, are probably sick and tired of God's man coming and telling them how wrong they are for not worshiping in Jerusalem and not going back to the temple.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, oh, okay, well, I'll take the temple up here. I'll keep it with me. So he takes everything out of it and shows that Jerusalem's not that great after all, by breaking down the wall.
So one of the things that I find interesting here, though, is that he did not kill Amaziah. What did he do with him? He captured him. So there was kind of I think there was an underlying point to that, in the sense that he's trying to show what exactly was happening because of his actions. There was a opportunity for Jehoash to learn this king, and say, all right, look, because of what you did, because of your actions, you poked the bear, and the bear is now fighting back. So he is seeing the consequence of those actions. Not that he's going to learn anything from it, but he was captured, and then Jerusalem was sacked because of it. Presumably, he was released later, and if we get far enough in this, we will see that. So he was captured, and then he saw this damage to his kingdom. Chronicles 25 and verse 20 answers the next question. The next question says, why were Amaziah and Judah delivered into the hands of their enemies? Well, it says, but Amaziah would not heed, for it came from God that he might give them into the hands of their enemies, because they sought the gods of Edom. So we see this is definitively because God was angry with the fact that he took the gods of Edom on and was worshiping them. So he gave over into the hands of their enemies Judah as a whole. So that answers that question. So how did Amaziah die? Looking at 2 Kings 14, 19, and 20. It says, and they formed a conspiracy against him in Jerusalem and fled to Lachish, but they sent after him to Lachish and killed him there. Then they brought him on horses, and he was buried at Jerusalem with his fathers in the city of David. So there was a conspiracy because I think the people were just tired of his actions. They knew what had happened. They understood that God was angry. And so here was one way to get rid of him. So there was this conspiracy, and they chased him until they were able to catch up with him, and then they brought him back to the city of David to bury him. All right. So we've got a couple more minutes, so we'll get as far as we can. Jeroboam II was son of whom? And who is he compared, or he is compared to what other king of Israel? Let's look at verses 23 and 24. If somebody would read that. 2 Kings 14, 23 and 24.
In the 15th year of Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, became king in Samaria and reigned 41 years. He did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from all the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he made Israel king.
Okay, so who was he the son of? Joash. All right. So now, I want to skip down to verse number 4 here. It says, by whose hand did the Lord save Israel? And it kind of goes down that path, that lineage. So we saw 14:23, it talks about Jeroboam being the son of Joash. But let's look at chapter 13 and verse 10 here. Flip over one page probably. It says, in the 37th year of Joash, king of Judah, Joash, the son of Jehoaz, became king over Israel in Samaria and reigned 16 years. So who was Joash the son of? Jehoaz, right? All right, now let's go back to 2 Kings 14 and verse 27. It says there, and the Lord did not say that he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, but saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, the son of Joash. But if you look back at 13, 4 and 5, it says, then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel, and he delivered unto them, or into the hand of Hazael, king of Syria, and into the hand of Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, all their days. So Jehoaz pleaded with the Lord, and the Lord listened to him, for he saw the oppression of Israel, because the king of Syria oppressed them. So the answer, the immediate answer is Jeroboam, right? That the hand that saved them was Jeroboam's. But it was also by the hand of Jehoaz, because he is the grandfather of Jeroboam, and he stepped out and pleaded with God to allow him to do this. And it all started a army of, what was it, 50 men? Yes, in verse 7 it says, he left the army, only 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, and 10,000 foot soldiers. So he did this and was allowed to keep on the kingdom of Israel, and God did not blot their name out. Thank you for your attention. Jeremy Claunch, if he's feeling better, will be teaching next week. I'll be out of town, but then I'll pick up the remaining 3 weeks of May. So, thank you.